Could Formula 1 2019 be the most photorealistic racing sim of its kind? Developer Codemasters has developed some gorgeous games this generation after all. Dirt Rally 2.0 is among the best in its field, and later this year we'll see Grid rebooted on PS4 and Xbox One. But between those games, the F1 series is really where we see the team's EGO engine get an upgrade each year, iterated upon with every release. All of which means we never have a final, definitive moment to celebrate how great it looks. It's a constant trickle of small tweaks and upgrades that never gets its dues. But in F1 2019, and as someone who rarely puts much time into the F1 games, I came away very impressed. Focusing on the PS4 and Xbox One systems today, there's certainly a single best way to play it, no doubt about that. More on the comparisons in a second, but it'd be a disservice to Codemasters to call any version a disappointment visually. Each in their own way, every console is nicely optimized for. Loading up a race, whether that's the Yas Marina and its gorgeous volumetric lights on lamps, or the classic Spa circuit, the quality of materials translates to every system. A physically based pipeline is at the heart of the EGO engine's achievements in Dirt 2.0, and that very much returns here as well. At first glance, the slick dewy effect on tyres and the way rain splatters against car bodies just looks utterly authentic. What's new in 2019 then? Well, lighting gets a big focus from Codemasters with a new volumetric system. It marks a particular upgrade over 2018, which could look a little flat, with the space around lights simply not being filled. This time, every roadside lamp and headlight casts a proper beam of light outwards. Atmospheric effects like dust and dirt now fill in the air in between too. It's the final piece in the puzzle, in my mind, to bringing the series up to par with the genre's best. Combined with its HDR implementation, which was already solid, and its genuine showcase material for modern TV sets. Not to say everything looks great all of the time. The screen motion blur works well, but the team's use of temporal anti-aliasing returns, leaving a light banding trail. It only happens in select moments, and honestly 99% of the time it's impossible to catch. Up against fences or anything with high density of detail, you'll see some light artifacting. That goes for any console, though of course PC does have an option to switch off entirely. There's also the goings on outside the racing. You know, the bits most of us will skip anyway as we try to get to the action. The engineering team are especially glaring and find themselves deep into the uncanny valley with their stiff, emotionless faces and rigid body motion capture. Okay, it's a nitpick, a side detail kind of similar to the crowds in FIFA. In fact, much like FIFA, it is forgivable overall, but does serve as a reminder of the game's limitations when you get those replays, especially after impressing so much with the core gameplay visuals. Other than that, the on-track action is still standout, and it doesn't put a damper on Codemasters' work there. Clearly there's a lot of competition in the racing space. Gran Turismo Sport is still, for my taste, the most versatile and convincing racer on the market. But as a project with such a laser focus on F1 racing, Codemasters pushes a surprisingly high level of quality in its own way. Bearing in mind it's a multi-platform project too, there's a division of attention there, but it comes out beautifully. In fact, the only major gripe I have with the lesser powered machines is the screen tearing, but more on that later. Visually speaking, we have the Xbox One X version running here with 4K output selected, and as you'd expect, it's easily the best way to play. So what's the actual native resolution we're looking at here? Well, on the X, the setup is similar to F1 2017, the last in the series we covered. I'm getting 3840 by 2160 from my pixel counts, but there appears to be a form of temporal reconstruction in there too. The telltale sign is there's a checkerboard artifact on movement, a kind of stippling line. If true, it means the current and previous frames are combined to create the full image, but it's never a true 4K. Practically speaking, that makes it a 1920 by 2160 image, which is still an impressive benchmark to hit at 60 FPS. In effect, these checkerboard artifacts are never that intrusive, and with the TAA and motion blur on the go, it's not really going to notice. Presentation wise, the result perhaps isn't as focused as a native 3840 by 2160, but the picture is still clear right across the distance. It's also getting ahead of the game here, but you'll notice X is also the only version that runs with practically no screen tearing, or drops under 60 FPS. So all round, it's a very respectable turnout for the machine. plus it has a few visual benefits over the base Xbox One model. The regular Xbox One targets 1920 by 1080, but again it uses a form of reconstruction to get there with the same artifacts as X. In terms of differences, they are subtle. X actually has high quality screen space reflections with much clearer definition on those rain-soaked streets. You'll also get sharper shadows on Xbox One X and improved filtering on top of those shadows. Beyond that, it's all in the resolution and performance. As an X enhancement, the extra GPU power there really is all in service of hitting 60 FPS at the best resolution it could afford. Curiously, and unlike Dirt Rally 2.0, which I covered earlier this year, there's no option to toggle a 4K mode on or off in F1 2019. Perhaps it's not needed. It seems a bit redundant given it is hitting home at 60 FPS almost all of the time. Having an optional low-res configuration might have been a handy fallback if there were some tracks which couldn't muster 60 FPS, but from what I've seen, it's not an issue. What of the PlayStation consoles then? Well, the base PS4 is an interesting counterpoint to Xbox One in that it targets 1920 by 1080 natively, but does it without any sign of reconstruction. It's a plain, raw, native 1080p, and that means zooming close, you get a cleaner image with less shimmering details. Plus, those checkerboard artifacts are gone. It's again a strong sign that that's what Xbox One uses to reach the same number, despite the GPU horsepower gap next to PS4. Between the two consoles, resolution really is the main difference. Ambient occlusion around objects is more prominent on PS4, but other than that, we're being served identical assets, lighting, and everything else. PS4 Pro is also interesting in its own way. In this case, the game's rendering a 3200 by 1800 picture, so obviously it's less crisp than X. Again, there's signs of reconstruction from a lower res on Pro 2, and so if it is indeed checkerboard rendering, it's essentially 1600 by 1800 per frame. I've got to say, it still looks great in motion though, and it means PS4 Pro is actually getting a 38% increase in pixels over the native 1920 by 1080 on PS4. I think as a way to make the most of the system is a better way to go. The extra pixel detail does translate to better visibility on the track. With all that considered, actual visual differences outside res aren't major. Shadows and reflections are the main points, but the core assets are identical. Frame rate performance is really the last major part of the puzzle here. 60 FPS is so crucial to a game like this. It's fast, and overtaking opponents can often be by a tight hairline margin. There's simply no room for sudden hiccups or drops here. The reality is though, every version besides X has drops into the 50 to 60 FPS region. How intrusive it gets all comes down to the number of AI cars in view and the weather. So first off, let's get the most obvious point out of the way. Xbox One X is by far the most consistent performer. I've thrown everything I can at it. Heavy rain, 19 AI cars ahead of the grid, and complex tracks just can't push it to drop a frame. Now, adaptive VSync is in place, so the screen will in theory tear at the top before you see a full-blown drop frame. You can catch glimpses of tearing on the HUD elements when you bring up the menus, but in gameplay it's difficult to catch. It's not always a given, but Xbox One X is the best looking and performing of the quartet of consoles, no complaints here. Next down the line is PS4 Pro. What we saw with F1 2017 is more dips into the mid-50s when pushed by weather and multiple AI cars, and so it goes here too. In practice, it does intrude a lot more than I'd like, but this is at least only a trouble on certain tracks. You have to be lagging behind the group by quite a way to see it too, where circuits like Hockenheim reveal screen tear. It's almost certainly the alpha elements causing it, given it mainly flares up around alpha heavy trees and multiple cars splashing water under the tyres. Not ideal, but in the light of day, and when you're ahead of the pack, it's a clear 60 FPS on Pro. The base consoles are similar to one another. When pushed to extremes like this, both are worse off than PS4 Pro, going as far as the low 50 FPS area. Tearing is more prevalent and courses up and down the screen. The cause is much the same, but it's worth stressing only the occasional tear creeps in for the majority of clear weather play. Base Xbox One is guilty of some more obvious drops to 50 FPS even here, but again that's with a lot of AI cars ahead of you. All round it's the weakest of the four, but it's still very respectable. Clearly the enhanced consoles are the better picks for pristine image quality and tighter 60 FPS, and yes, Xbox One X is the best equipped at handling both aspects. As a way to have the fewest distractions in playing one of the best looking racing games this generation, X is easily the way to go, but PS4 Pro offers a solid rendition too. Regardless, it shouldn't overshadow what is fundamentally a great looking game on every console, and one that's responsive to every small nudge of the analog stick. In terms of forging a connection between the controller and the on-screen response, it's among the best I've played, and well worth giving a try if you're even remotely into racing sims. That's everything for today though. If you did enjoy this analysis, please feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell to get notifications as any video lands. To get this video at source file quality, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in direct contact, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.